people managed to craft an atmospheric, intelligent story that leaves its viewers talking for literally decades to come. But Stanley Kubrick struck gold with his 1980 adaptation of Stephen King's The Shining, starring Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. Now, for the longest time, I didn't understand The Shining. It was weird and slow and complicated, and after my first viewing of it, I was kind of like, what was that? Like, I didn't understand what I had just seen. But now that I'm older, I've come to realize that, like Halloween, the beauty in the end of The Shining is in the ambiguity of it. The fact that there are so many different interpretations of what happened at the Overlook and what was going on in that story is part of what gives the film its charm, not to mention the fact that it was really, really well acted and well written too. At its core, The Shining is a story about domestic violence and emotional abuse. Jack Torrence is a recovering alcoholic, and he's got some pretty severe emotional issues that he's never properly dealt with, which makes it fairly easy for the Overlook to play on his wants and desires in order to take control of his body and his mind. In speaking on The Shining, Stanley Kubrick once said that there's something inherently wrong with the human personality. There's an evil side to it. One of the things that horror stories can do is show us the archetypes of the unconscious. We can see the dark side without having to confront it directly. Now, from the get-go, there's very obviously something off about Jack. He is not content with his family and his life as a husband and a father. He seems to hate his job as a teacher. He's a struggling author who sees everything in his life as a distraction from his work. And to top things off, he's an alcoholic. Now, you pair that with a haunted hotel who's got paranormal abilities, and that's a problem. It plays on and uses his flaws to get what it wants, and what it wants is Danny and Wendy dead. And in thinking more about that quote, I think there's something to be said about Wendy's journey in this film too. She's having to subconsciously face the dark side of Jack's personality through Danny's trauma and thinking about the possibilities of everything that Jack is really capable of. Wendy's journey in that film is just as much psychological as it is physical. At the end of the film, after we've watched Jack's slow descent into insanity and we've seen Wendy so desperately try to do everything in her power to protect her son, we come to the defining moment of The Shining. At this point, Jack's mind has broken. The Overlook is in complete control of him. Wendy is desperate and Danny is scared. And as Danny flees from an injured Jack, he figures out a way to outsmart him, leaving him to die in the blizzard within the maze. Now, to me and to many others, the most intriguing thing about the ending of The Shining isn't the stuff with Jack and Danny or the stuff with Jack and Wendy or the fact that Danny and Wendy escape. It's the close-up shot on the picture at the end of the hallway next to the gold room of Jack from decades earlier. Again, the beauty is in the ambiguity. What does it all mean? Was Jack reincarnated? Does this mean that the Overlook has consumed Jack's soul and he's now a part of it? Was Jack just simply possessed by the Overlook? I mean, there's so many different ways that you could look at it and so many different little Easter egg things throughout the film that just kind of make you go, huh. And it's such a beautiful way to end that kind of story. What does all of that mean? Was Jack simply possessed by the Overlook? Was he reincarnated to do what he did once he arrived at the Overlook? Did the hotel just consume his soul? And the picture is meant to mean that Jack is now a part of the hotel. There's so many different avenues and so many different ways that you could look at and interpret the ending of this film. The picture is dated 1921, which obviously raises many questions. I mean, how is that even physically possible? The concept of reincarnation is super eerie, especially given the conversation with Mr. Grady in the bathroom. Mr. Grady tells Jack that he's always been the caretaker and that they've always been here. Is Jack really having a conversation with a ghost, or is all of this just in his own head? Is Jack really a reincarnation of a former staff member, or is Mr. Grady suggesting some supernatural form of predestination? I mean, did the Overlook somehow just know that Jack would end up there at the end of his life? Did the hotel absorb his soul? Is Jack in some sort of, like, purgatory? I mean, it's so interesting. There are so many different theories that have been thrown out there over the years. The fact that this film continues to inspire conversations between moviegoers and horror fans over 40 years after its release really speaks to the quality of the story told, and that's why The Shining has arguably one of the greatest horror film endings of all time.